Coming up, North Dakota has a new Native legislator, and writing your own tribal history. Darren Parry shares more about his book, The Bear River Massacre. Plus, APTN national correspondent Angel Moore recaps her stories north of the medicine line. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start in Arizona, where U.S. Senator Kyrsten Sinema made headlines Friday after she switched parties. ICT's Patty Tholahongba was at her first public appearance after making the announcement.
Tribal leaders gave Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema a warm welcome. It came hours after she made the announcement of switching from being a Democrat to an independent. The meeting was for the Tribal Leaders Water Policy Council and the Colorado River Tribal Roundtable. Sinema sat down for a discussion on water infrastructure funding and its impact to tribes.
There were federal officials there from Interior, the Bureau of Reclamation, and I think she really made some pointed comments about how she is very concerned that tribes, that Arizona gets the resources needed to see us through the drought.
The news of her changing parties didn't seem to faze the leaders.
I have no doubt in my mind that she'll continue to support tribes, not only in Arizona, but probably all tribal issues in the United States.
Will it have an impact and change the way you work with tribes and advocate on behalf of tribes?
As I said to folks across Arizona this morning, I've registered an independent because it comports with my values. So folks who've depended on me to be a voice for tribal sovereignty, for our partnership in solving water issues, and for all the challenges that Indian nations face across their country, they can depend on me to keep doing exactly that.
Applause came when Sinema announced she's appointing the chairwoman of the Colorado River Indian Tribes to her Water Advisory Council.
The Colorado River Indian Tribes has land in, the reservation has land in Arizona and in California, and we have the highest priority water rights of the 5 lower basin on the Colorado River.
Tribal leaders say they are counting on the newly declared independent senator to continue to uphold tribal sovereignty. In Phoenix, Patty Tholahongba, ICT News.
Families in Canada are demanding justice to recover bodies of their relatives who have been murdered. Last week, the bodies of 2 Indigenous women were found in a local landfill in Winnipeg. Police are now saying they don't have the resources to recover those bodies. According to the Winnipeg Forensic Unit, safety hazards and the size of the landfill were factors in the decision not to search. The women were allegedly murdered by Jeremy Skibiki. Skibiki has been charged with the murders of 4 women. That includes Long Plains First Nation citizens Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris, as well as Crane River First Nation citizen Rebecca Contoy. A 4th woman has yet to be identified publicly. The families held a press conference to say they are in disbelief that the remains of their relatives won't be recovered. Many cited that their loved ones needed a final resting place that wasn't a landfill. Now to Bolivia, where Spanish literacy training is making a difference for Indigenous communities. The classes are part of a government-sponsored program called Bolivia Reads. Adults from an Indigenous community in the Bolivian highlands near La Paz have been learning to read and write. More than 20,000 senior citizens, mainly women from low-income rural communities, have been taking part in the classes. One local citizen who is learning to read and write says he feels good that he's catching up with the next generation.
Se siente bien porque
feels good because before there weren't any of these things, but now there is everything for us to learn. We are already catching up to our children.
Though native Bolivian cultures and languages are being lost as more people learn Spanish, national programs are being created to protect and maintain Indigenous knowledge. Well, the nominations for the 28th Annual Critics' Choice Awards are out. On the list were two Indigenous-led projects. Prey, the suspense prequel to Predator, earned a nomination for Best Movie Made for Television. The lead, Amber Midthunder of the Fort Peck Sioux Tribe, also received a nomination for Best Actress in a Limited Series or Movie Made for Television. The film, directed by Comanche and Blackfeet creative Jane Myers, broke the record for Hulu's highest-viewed premiere earlier this year. Hulu's Reservation Dogs was also on the list of nominees. The show as a whole was nominated for Best Comedy, and several of its stars could win awards. Tefera Wunatai has been nominated for Best Actor in a Comedy, Devery Jacobs for Best Actress in a Comedy, and Paulina Alexis for Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy. Winners will be announced at the award ceremony in Los Angeles next year in mid-January. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. There is a new Native American state representative in North Dakota. Jayme Davis is no stranger to politics and government. She worked for Senator Kent Conrad in a variety of areas, including his liaison between federal agencies and Native nations. She also previously worked for the Turtle Mountain Community College and the Native Governance Center. Davis is now the tribe's Law, Policy, and Research Department Administrator and Policy Specialist. Welcome, Jayme, and congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So let's just jump right in here. Tell us a little bit about your journey running for political office.
Well, it honestly just started out of sheer responsibility that I have to my community, my nation, my people. We had redistricting happen here due to the census. So once I learned that District 9A was fully encompassing our Native Nation of Turtle Mountain, where I'm from, an enrolled member of, I just, again, felt an inherent responsibility to run. So threw my name in there and decided to go for it.
And now that you've been elected, maybe talk about what your game plan is for your first 100 days in office.
Well, for our for our state legislature, we have 80 days. We start January 3rd and go through the end of April. And then it's every other year. So again, won't be able to be in session till 2025, I guess it would be. So for these 80 days, I'm going to hit the ground running. ICWA is a big one that I hope to codify within the state of North Dakota. Drug task force officers on our reservations or, to help us out. Funding for our county. And then a big one for me is education. My father was the college president here, so looking for non-beneficiary funding and some funding for our CTE programs.
North Dakota tribes have been in the news recently for mining and pipeline protests. What kinds of concerns are you hearing from constituents?
Well, being my county, Rolette County, we banned fracking. Our tribe banned fracking a few years ago. So thankfully, that's already on our books here. And so my constituents in District 9A haven't had any concerns across our county here, but through the state, I know there is my mother's from Standing Rock, so I know there's always concerns down there, but I personally haven't had any quite yet, but I'm sure there will be some coming.
The other big issue, of course, is missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. Maybe talk about that.
Yeah, that's always a huge one. Being we only have 80 days, there's, a lot of things that I want to accomplish. Missing and murdered Indigenous relatives is a huge one. I've been a huge advocate of putting that at the forefront of everybody's focus, and I'm looking for some legislation, hopefully, to help in that. I haven't pinned that down quite yet, exactly what I can be of service to within these 80 days and get passed, but I'm on the look for some legislation to possibly put through this session.
Well, Jayme Davis, the newly elected state representative in North Dakota, thank you so much.
Thank you.
American history classes often do not include the histories of Native people, so today more and more Native authors are writing books to tell their own histories. That includes a new book called The Bear River Massacre, A Shoshone History. It was written by Darren Parry, the former chairman of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation. ICT senior correspondent Patty Tholahongba spoke to him about this project that was just named Book of the Year by the Department of History at Brigham Young University.
You could say Darren Parry has spent his lifetime preparing to write this book. It was published in 2019, and it's a highly personal account of Parry, his grandmother, and what his tribe endured. Darren Parry, thank you for joining us. You paint such a wonderful picture of your grandmother. Tell us about her.
Oh, one of the biggest blessings of my life was my parents both worked, which means I got dropped off at my grandmother's house every day. But, back in those days, she was just my grandmother. I didn't realize what a person she was, an activist, and the life she'd led up to that point, boarding schools and other things. And only as I became older did I really realize the scope of her work in telling the story of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone people, and especially the Bear River Massacre. She worked her entire life to tell that story to people. I remember one day telling me that, Darren, no one has ever wanted to hear our story before. One day you will have to make them listen. And so, that always resonated with me as a young child. I didn't understand it fully, but man, as I gotten older, and especially after she passed, it really started echoing in my brain again of what she said.
When she was in high school, you write that she actually started writing down her tribe's history. And so you had that to draw on. Give us an outline of your book and kind of what it covers.
You know what? She went to boarding schools in Sherman Institute in California. She decided there, though, that she was going to get educated and use that system to educate herself. She came home, continued that education, ended up getting a bachelor's degree in English. But she began writing down all of those stories. So my book, although the cover says the Bear River Massacre, a Shoshone History, it really encompasses the whole history of our tribe from, probably early 1800s when Chief Sagwitch was born, what that culture would have looked like, who he was as a tribal leader, as a chief. And one chapter is about my grandmother, of course, and I'm actually working on her biography right now. You could write a whole book about May Timbimbu Parry. But I just wanted to, taking all of her notes and looking at what she thought was important, I just used that as a guideline. So culture, who we were as a people, how the Bear River Massacre really changed us and what it meant for us for the future, including joining the LDS Church 10 years after the massacre. And then why joining the church really changed the trajectory of our people in a sense that made it different from other tribes. While the government was moving other tribes to reservations in those 1870s, 1880s, because we just joined the church, Brigham Young told us not to go to a reservation at Fort Holland. Because of that, we ended up living on a church-sponsored farm. The church called for missionary families that taught us to farm and ranch and raise cattle and sheep and plant crops. And so from that time on, from 1880 on, they assimilated us into the local community and culture. And, you know, you can debate that all day, whether that was good or bad, but it's history. It's what happened. And so I'm not going to apologize for it or make excuses why our leaders chose to go that way, but they did. And it changed who we are. You know, not being on a reservation, we lose our culture and our language quicker. And but we don't have some of the challenges that some reservations face today. And so it's a mixed bag of blessings or curses, if you want to say.
You know, you also recently at the Utah Division of State History Awards, you and your grandmother were named honorary life members. What was that moment like for you?
You know, well, they called me and said, you need to be to the awards ceremony. And we're going to give your grandmother an award. And so, I was going to be there no matter what. And I actually spoke at the conference earlier. And so to be able to go, just knowing that I was going to receive this, they were going to honor her. She was the first person they honored that had passed. And so it was such a tremendous award. And then when they called me up, I got the award too. And I was really overwhelmed that more so for my grandmother, because, you know, she was a woman of color. She was a woman that grew up in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Society never gave them a voice, never gave them a platform. And so the fact that the state of Utah would was tremendous.
Since your book has come out, what have readers told you that was the most surprising to them to learn about your history?
You know, a lot of people comment about the massacre, but a much more comment about my ability to forgive. Because look, it was the Mormon pioneers. They were the reason of the massacre. They may not have fired a bullet, but certainly they were the cause. And so the depletion of resources here in the Cache Valley and other things that what led to it. But what I find people really fascinated with is my ability to forgive and move forward and try to work with everybody to make it better. And so I have many Native American friends that are loud and angry and still feel justified in seeking restitution. And sometimes they're hard to hear because they're speaking so loudly. And I've just chosen a different path. I've chosen to acknowledge hard history. It's okay. Do we acknowledge those things? But at the end of the day, it's okay, let's talk about these things so we don't repeat it, certainly. But let's talk about it in the context of what can we do together now to make this world better? Because what happened to us, we see happening all over the world still today. And so my end goal is always, how can we make this world better for all of us?
Well, Darren Parry, thank you so much for sharing your book, The Bear River Massacre, A Shoshone History, with us today.
My pleasure.
Frequent viewers of the ICT newscast know that some of the stellar reporting that comes from our friends in Canada at the news organization APTN. Today we're joined by Angel Moore. She's a national correspondent in the Halifax Bureau, covering the news in the Atlantic region of Canada. Hi there, Angel.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's wonderful to see you. Let's just jump right in here because I want to start with the death of Chantel Moore. Tell us about that.
Yes, that was shocking to everyone, to the entire country. She was shot in June 2020 by a police officer during a wellness check and died instantly. That was after George Floyd was killed in the United States. And then after about a week after Chantel was shot and killed, another community member, Rodney Levi, about a week later, in the same province in New Brunswick, was also shot and killed by RCMP police. So the outrage across the country was unbelievable. And it's a constant issue with police brutality.
Maybe talk about some of the sources that you spoke to when you were covering these stories.
When it both happened, actually, I spoke with the families. I think the same day. I found out right away through people that I know, and people feel more comfortable talking to APTN. And you probably can understand this, that people would feel more comfortable speaking with Indigenous reporters. So I had spoken to the family quite a bit immediately from when she was shot all the way through. And sometimes I would just speak with the family to see how they were doing, not necessarily an interview, but just to connect.
Angel, I want to switch topics because I know that you cover fisheries. Tell us a little bit about your behind the scenes of what that looks like for you. I know you and I spoke about that before, but tell our viewers what that looks like.
That is. I go on a lobster boat, and it's my camera and I I have a monopod that I hold the camera and I balance it on my foot. So that is, it's a lot of fun, but it's dangerous and it's intense. The fishers here are fighting for their treaty rights and harvesting lobster, but not just lobster, other fish. To earn a moderate livelihood, and they have a treaty right to do so. So they're asserting their treaty rights. So really, the story is not about fishing. It's about treaty rights and constitutional rights. Some of their quite a few of the fishermen are fighting charges in court for fishing without a license. And what's shifting now is that they're challenging the court under their constitutional challenge, saying that actually the regulations of the Fisheries Act violate their constitutional right and treaty right, and really it does actually. It's a matter of asserting it, and the Canadian government accepting that these treaties that were signed in good faith, and people have a right to assert them.
Angel, as we near the end of 2022, when you look back on all of the number of stories that you've covered, is there a particular story that stands out to you the most?
I think the story that stands out to me the most is any story I do regarding residential school survivors. There was a Freedom Walk at the end of June that they have had for a couple of years now, and plan to do it on an annual basis. And connecting with elders and residential school survivors and hearing their stories, helps us all understand the trauma that we've all gone through and passed down through the generations. So it's, I lost my grandmother a few years ago, so who was also a residential school survivor. So that connection with the elders and hearing their stories and their knowledge and wisdom, on a personal level, but also on a professional level, I think is very important for us to realize the truth of what has happened. And with truth and reconciliation, the elders always say we have to start with the truth, before we can reconcile or make any difference. We have to know what happened. We have to know the history. So it's a favorite story I cover because it's important to all of us, and it's touches me personally as well.
We only have a very short time left here, Angel, but when you're looking forward to 2023, very quickly tell us what kinds of stories we can expect to see from you.
Well, I will probably be spending some more time in court as the fishermen are asserting their constitutional rights. And I've also covered some stories about people here in Mi'kma'ki being treated with racism in the healthcare and in hospitals. One community was tested without their consent, 61 people actually. So that is going to be in court, and more stories like that. The other ones I can't tell you because they're going to be revealing their scoop.
Well, that's fair. That's definitely fair. Angel Moore, national correspondent for APTN National News. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
The Sand Creek Massacre, the betrayal that changed Cheyenne and Arapaho people forever, focuses on tribal accounts of Colorado's deadliest day. Exhibition details at historycoloradocenter.org.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.